Millionaire disguises himself as mechanic and starts working in a garage. 2 days later, he's horrified when something happens. The sun rose over the glass and steel skyscrapers of the metropolis, bathing the windows of the luxury penthouse where Alex Morgan, heir to the Morgan Empire, awoke with a deep sigh. His eyes, the color of the most expensive coffee, scanned the room decorated with designer furniture and artwork valued in the millions. Everything screamed opulence, but for Alex, each object was another shackle in the golden cage that imprisoned him. He got up from the king-size bed, his bare feet sinking into the soft Persian rug. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and observed the city sprawling before him. From this height, people looked like ants, tiny and insignificant. That's how he felt, despite his fortune and his surname. Small, insignificant, trapped in a world he hadn't chosen. "Mr. Morgan, your breakfast is ready," announced a voice through the intercom. Alex closed his eyes, counting to 10 before responding with a curt, "Thank you, Martin." As he dressed in a custom-made suit that cost more than many people's annual salary, Alex mentally reviewed his plan. Today was the day. Today he would leave all this behind. The fortune, the surname, the responsibilities. Today Alex Morgan would disappear. In the dining room, his breakfast awaited him. Eggs Benedict, smoked salmon, exotic fruits cut with surgical precision. He barely touched it. His stomach was a knot of anticipation and fear. Was he really prepared to leave everything behind? "Sir, your father called. He wants to remind you of the board meeting at 10, informed Martin, the butler, in his usual formal tone. Alex nodded, feigning interest. "Thank you. Martin, I'll be ready on time." But there would be no meeting. There would be no more board meetings, no more decisions affecting the lives of thousands of employees, no more living under the crushing shadow of his father, Alfred Morgan, the ruthless magnate who had built the family empire with blood, sweat, and, according to rumors, some other people's tears. When Martin withdrew, Alex took out his phone and sent a cryptic message. "The eagle flies at dawn." It was the signal his only accomplice was waiting for. Half an hour later, Alex was leaving his building dressed in an impeccable suit, briefcase in hand, like any other day. He got into his Ferrari and drove to the outskirts of the city. In an abandoned industrial area, he met an old beat-up Volkswagen. There, Mike, his childhood friend and the only one he trusted for this mission, was waiting for him. "Are you sure about this, Al?" Mike asked, concern evident in his eyes. Alex nodded, taking off his suit jacket. "More sure than ever, brother." With quick movements, Alex changed. The designer suit was replaced by worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a baseball cap. Mike handed him a bag with cash, fake documents, and the keys to the Volkswagen. "Remember, now you're Albert Sanders' mechanic," Mike said, hugging his friend. "Take care, please." Alex returned the hug forcefully. "Thank you for everything, Mike. Destroy the phone as we agreed." With a final handshake, Alex got into the old car and started it, leaving behind the city, his identity, and the life he had known until then. The journey was long and lonely. Hours turned into days as Albert traversed the country, stopping only to eat at small roadside diners and sleep in cheap motels. Each mile that took him away from the metropolis was a weight lifting off his shoulders. Finally, after almost a week of travel, he reached his destination. Hidden Valley, a small town lost among mountains and forests. It was so different from the concrete jungle he came from that for a moment Albert thought he had traveled not only in distance but in time. The town was picturesque, with pastel-colored houses and cobblestone streets. In the central square, a fountain bubbled cheerfully, surrounded by elderly people chatting on wooden benches and children playing carefree. Albert parked in front of a small mechanic's garage. The sign, faded by the sun, read, "Pete's Garage." He took a deep breath and got out of the car. It was time to start his new life. The tinkling of a bell announced his entry into the garage. The smell of oil and metal welcomed him, so different from the expensive perfumes he was used to. "Just a moment," shouted a voice from under a raised car. Albert waited nervously, fiddling with the strap of his bag. Finally, a man in his 60s, with a grease-stained face and a kind smile, appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. "Welcome, stranger, I'm Pete. What can I do for you?" asked the man, extending a calloused hand. Albert shook it, surprised by the warmth of the gesture. "I'm Albert Sanders. I'm looking for work. I'm a mechanic. And well, I'm starting over." Pete looked him up and down as if evaluating him. "Mechanic, huh? And what brings you to our little corner of the world, Albert?" For a moment, panic seized Albert. What if his lie was discovered? What if Pete saw through his facade? But he forced himself to calm down and responded with the story he had rehearsed during his trip. "I come from the city. I had personal problems. I needed a change of scenery to start from scratch. A friend told me about Hidden Valley, said it was a good place to start over." Pete nodded slowly, a spark of understanding in his eyes. "We all have a past, son. What's important is what we do with our present." He paused, looking around the garage. "Well, the truth is I could use an extra pair of hands around here. How about you show me what you can do?" Relief flooded Albert. "Thank you, sir, I won't disappoint you. Call me Pete, boy, we're all family here." The next few hours were a baptism by fire for Albert. His hands, accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts and holding champagne glasses, now struggled with wrenches and spark plugs. But to his surprise, he found a strange pleasure in the physical work. Every drop of sweat, every grease stain was a reminder of his new freedom. As evening fell, Pete gave him a pat on the back. "Not bad for a city boy. The job is yours if you want it. I can't pay much, but it includes a room in the back of the garage." Albert felt he could cry with joy. "I'll take it. Thank you, Pete. You don't know what this means to me. Welcome to Hidden Valley, Albert. Tomorrow I'll introduce you to the rest of the town. We take care of our own here." That night, lying on a simple bed in a small but clean room, Albert looked out the window. The stars shone with an intensity he had never seen in the city. For the first time in years, he felt at peace, but fate had other plans for Albert, plans that would begin to unfold with the dawn and the arrival of a very special client at the garage. The sun had barely peeked over the mountains when the sound of a coughing engine woke Albert. He quickly dressed and went out to the garage, where he found Pete already working on an old Chevy that seemed to have seen better days. "Good morning, boy," Pete greeted with a smile. "Looks like we have early work. Can you take a look at the engine while I talk to the customer?" Albert nodded and approached the car. As he leaned over the open hood, he heard a female voice that made him hold his breath. "Thanks for seeing me so early, Pete. This old jalopy is my only way to get to work." That voice. There was something about it that awakened a distant memory in Albert. Slowly, he turned to look at the owner of that melodious voice and felt the world stop. There, talking animatedly with Pete, was the most beautiful woman Albert had ever seen. Her chestnut hair fell in waves over her shoulders, framing a face with delicate features and eyes, the color of the calm sea. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a flowery blouse, but radiated a natural elegance that no designer dress could match. But it wasn't just her beauty that left Albert breathless. There was something else, something he couldn't place. A sense of familiarity, like a déjà vu that slipped through his fingers every time he tried to grasp it. "Hey, Albert!" Pete's voice snapped him out of his trance. "Come meet Emma. She's our school teacher and one of the best people you'll meet in Hidden Valley." Albert approached, wiping his hands on a rag, suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance. "Nice to meet you, Emma. I'm Albert, the new mechanic." Emma smiled at him, and Albert felt his heart skip a beat. "Welcome to Hidden Valley, Albert. I hope our little town treats you well." When their hands touched in a handshake, Albert felt an electric current run through. His body, Emma's eyes opened slightly as if she too had felt something. "Thank you," Albert managed to say, struggling to maintain his composure. "Everyone has been very kind so far." Emma held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary before turning to Pete. "So, do you think you can fix my car by this afternoon? I have to take the kids on a field trip tomorrow." "Don't worry, honey," Pete replied. "Albert and I will take care of it. It'll be ready by the afternoon." Emma smiled gratefully and said goodbye, but not before casting a final, curious glance at Albert. When she left, Albert stood staring at the door, lost in his thoughts. "She's single, in case you're wondering," Pete said with a mischievous smile. Albert blushed. No, I mean, Pete laughed. "Relax, boy, I was just joking. Although I must say, I've never seen Emma look at anyone like that. Maybe you're just what this town needed." Pete's words resonated in Albert's mind as he worked on Emma's car. Why did he feel so attracted to her? It wasn't just her beauty. There was something else, something he couldn't explain. As the day progressed, Albert immersed himself in work, but his mind kept going back to Emma. There was something about her, in the way she had looked at him, that awakened buried memories deep within his being. While adjusting a piece of the engine, a fleeting memory crossed his mind. A youthful laugh, the scent of jasmine, a swing under a large oak tree. But as quickly as it came, the memory vanished, leaving him confused and with a strange feeling of nostalgia. "Everything okay, Albert?" Pete asked. Noticing his distraction, Albert shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. Yeah, I was just thinking about home." Pete looked at him with understanding. "Home is where the heart finds peace, boy. Maybe you're closer to home than you think." Pete's words, although enigmatic, comforted Albert. He continued working, but now with a new determination. Whatever fate had in store for him in Hidden Valley, he was ready to face it. In the mid-afternoon, Emma's car was ready. Albert offered to deliver it personally, ignoring Pete's knowing smile. He drove to the small-town school, a red brick building surrounded by a yard full of children's laughter. He parked and got out of the car, his heart pounding at the prospect of seeing Emma again. He found her in the yard, surrounded by children who were listening attentively as she read them a story. The scene was so idyllic, so different from everything Albert had known in his previous life, that for a moment he was left breathless. Emma looked up and saw him. A smile lit up her face, and Albert felt the world stop. She excused herself to the children and approached him. "Albert, what a surprise. Is everything okay with my car?" "Yes, all fixed," he replied, handing her the keys. Their fingers brushed and they both felt that electric current again. Albert began, but was interrupted by a male voice coming from the school entrance. "Emma, dear, is everything all right?" Albert turned to see a tall, well-dressed man approaching with a determined step. His face showed a mixture of curiosity and slight distrust as he looked Albert up and down. "Robert," Emma greeted, and Albert noticed a slight change in her voice. "Yes, everything's fine. Albert is the new mechanic at Pete's garage. He came to bring me my car." Robert extended his hand towards Albert with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Robert Valenti, mayor of Hidden Valley and Emma's fiancé. Welcome to our town." Albert felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Fiancé?" The word echoed in his mind as he shook Robert's hand, noticing the man's firm grip. "A pleasure, Mr. Mayor," Albert managed to say, struggling to maintain a neutral expression. "Albert Sanders, at your service." Emma seemed uncomfortable, her gaze passing from Robert to Albert and back. "Thank you for bringing my car, Albert. How much do I owe you?" "Oh, it's nothing," Albert replied, regaining some of his composure. "Courtesy of the house for the town's teacher." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Very generous of you, Mr. Sanders, but I insist you accept payment for your work. In Hidden Valley, we value honest effort." Albert was about to protest when Emma intervened. "He's right, Albert. Please accept the payment. You've done a great job." Resigned, Albert accepted the money Emma handed him, noticing how Robert passed a possessive arm around her waist. "Well, if you'll excuse me, I should get back to the garage," said Albert, eager to get out of this uncomfortable situation. "Have a good day." As he walked away, he heard Robert say, "Emma, honey, remember we have dinner with the investors for the new shopping mall tonight." Albert got into Pete's car and sat for a moment, processing what had just happened. Emma was engaged to the mayor, no less. Why did he feel this pang of jealousy? He barely knew Emma, and yet suddenly another fleeting memory crossed his mind. A summer dance, a promise whispered under the stars, a stolen first kiss. But again the memory vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving him confused and frustrated. He started the car and returned to the garage, his mind a whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. Upon arrival, Pete immediately noticed his mood. "What happened, boy? You look like you've seen a ghost." Albert sighed, dropping into a chair. "Pete, what do you know about Emma and the mayor?" Pete looked at him with a mixture of compassion and curiosity. "Ah, so you met Robert well? It's a complicated story. Emma and Robert have been engaged for a year, but not everything is as it seems." "What do you mean?" asked Albert, intrigued. Pete sat down in front of him, his face serious. "You see, Emma comes from a humble family. Her parents had a small farm on the outskirts of town, but they lost it years ago due to, well, let's say there were some unfair business decisions that affected them. Emma had to struggle a lot to get ahead, to become a teacher." Albert felt a pang of guilt, though he didn't understand why Pete continued. "Robert appeared in her life like a knight in shining armor. He offered her stability, the opportunity to help her family. But between us," Pete lowered his voice, "many in town believe Emma isn't really happy with him. There's something in her eyes, a sadness that shouldn't be there in an engaged woman." Albert nodded slowly, processing the information. "And the shopping mall that Robert mentioned." Pete frowned. "Ah, that project, Robert says it will bring progress to the town, but many fear it will destroy the charm of Hidden Valley. Plus, there are rumors about the methods he's using to acquire the necessary land." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching. Pete stood up. "Duty calls, boy. But be careful. Hidden Valley may seem like a quiet place, but it has its secrets and its dangers, and Robert Valenti is not a man to be trifled with." Albert remained thoughtful as Pete attended to the new customer. His new life in Hidden Valley was getting more complicated than he had imagined. Emma, the mysterious shopping mall project, the fleeting memories he couldn't decipher, it all mixed in his mind, creating an enigma he felt the need to solve. That night, lying in his small room behind the garage, Albert couldn't stop thinking about Emma. Why did he feel such a strong connection to her? And what did those fragmented memories that appeared in his mind mean? As sleep overtook him, Albert couldn't imagine that very soon, his past and his present would collide in a way that would test everything he thought he knew about himself and about Hidden Valley. The next morning, Albert woke to the sound of a commotion in the street. He quickly dressed and went out to see what was happening. A group of people had gathered in front of the town hall, holding signs and shouting slogans. "What's going on?" Albert asked an old woman observing from the sidewalk. "It's about the shopping mall," she replied, shaking her head. "Robert wants to expropriate the land of the old Claude's response was limited, as it hit the maximum length allowed at this time. GL Continua D. Guzman Farm to build it. People are furious." Albert moved closer to listen. Among the crowd, he saw Emma, her face a mixture of concern and determination. She was arguing heatedly with Robert, who was trying to calm the crowd from the town hall steps. "You can't do this," someone shouted. "That land has belonged to the Guzman family for generations." "Progress is inevitable," Robert responded, his voice amplified by a megaphone. "The shopping mall will bring jobs and prosperity to Hidden Valley." Suddenly, Emma snatched the megaphone from Robert's hands. "At what cost, Robert? Destroying our family's legacy, changing the essence of our town." The crowd cheered Emma's words. Robert, visibly annoyed, tried to recover the megaphone, but Emma moved away. Her eyes met. Albert's in the crowd, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Taking advantage of the distraction, Robert managed to snatch back the megaphone. "Emma, honey, I understand your concern, but this is neither the place nor the time. We'll discuss this in private." The crowd began to disperse, murmuring their discontent. Emma descended the stairs, ignoring Robert's attempts to stop her, and headed straight for Albert. "Albert, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can we go somewhere private?" Before Albert could respond, Robert caught up with them. "Emma, what do you think you're doing? We need to discuss what just happened." "Not now, Robert," Emma replied firmly. "I need a moment." Robert looked at Albert with evident contempt. "I don't know what's going on here, Sanders, but I warn you to stay away from my fiancé." "Robert, enough," Emma intervened. "Albert is just a friend, and I can decide who I talk to." The tension was palpable. Albert, aware of the curious glances from the neighbors, decided to act. "Emma, we can talk at the garage if you want. Pete won't arrive until later." Emma nodded gratefully and began walking with Albert, leaving a furious Robert behind. As they walked away, Albert couldn't help but notice how Emma trembled slightly. Once in the privacy of the garage, Emma collapsed into a chair, silent tears running down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Albert, I shouldn't have dragged you into this." Albert knelt in front of her, resisting the urge to take her hands. "Don't apologize, Emma. What's really going on?" Emma looked at him, and Albert felt his heart shrink at the pain in her eyes. "It's complicated," she began. "The land that Robert wants for the shopping mall, it used to belong to my family." Albert held his breath, feeling he was about to discover something important. "Your family? But Pete told me the Guzmans." "The Guzmans bought the land when my family was forced to sell it," Emma explained. "It was years ago when I was just a little girl. A big corporation came to town promising jobs and development. My father trusted them, invested everything we had, but it was a scam. We lost everything." As Emma spoke, images began to form in Albert's mind. A man in a suit, documents being signed, a family crying. And suddenly, as if a veil had been lifted, Albert remembered everything. His father, Alfred Morgan, closing the deal that would ruin Emma's family. And he, a young Alex, watching it all from the shadows, feeling powerless and guilty. The shock of the revelation hit him hard. He was the reason Emma and her family had suffered. He was part of the corporation that had destroyed their lives. "Albert, are you okay?" Emma's worried voice brought him back to the present. "You've gone pale." Albert struggled to maintain his composure. He couldn't reveal his true identity, not now. "I'm fine," he managed to say. It affects me to see how unfair life has been to you." Emma smiled weakly at him. "Thank you for listening to me. I don't know why, but I feel I can trust you. There's something about you that seems familiar, comforting." Emma's words were like a dagger to Albert's heart. He wanted to confess everything, tell her who he really was, but fear paralyzed him. How would she react to knowing he was part of the family that had ruined hers? "Emma," he began, his voice trembling. But before he could continue, the garage door burst open. Robert entered, his face a mask of fury. "So here you are," he shouted, looking at Emma and then at her. "Albert, what's going on here? Is this mechanic the reason you've been so distant lately?" Emma stood up, facing Robert. "It's not what you think. Robert Albert is just a friend who was listening to me." "A friend?" Robert scoffed. "A nobody who appeared out of nowhere a few days ago. Who are you really, Sanders? What are you hiding?" Albert felt the ground move beneath his feet. His secret was in danger of being discovered. But before he could respond, another voice joined the confrontation. "I can answer that question," said a deep voice from the garage door. Everyone turned to see a man in a dark suit with a penetrating gaze. Albert recognized him immediately. It was Jack Soto, the best private investigator his father used to. "Hire Mr. Alex Morgan," said Soto, looking directly at Albert. "Your father has been looking for you." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma looked at Albert with a mixture of confusion and betrayal. Robert seemed to be processing the information, his face passing from surprise to calculation in a matter of seconds. And Albert, or rather Alex, felt his newly built world crumbling around him. His past had caught up with him, and now he would have to face the consequences of his secrets and lies. The silence that followed Jack Soto's revelation seemed to last an eternity. In Pete's small garage, time had stopped. Emma was the first to break the silence, her voice barely a whisper. "Alex Morgan? From Morgan Industries?" Albert, or rather Alex, closed his eyes, unable to face Emma's hurt gaze. When he opened them again, his face showed a mixture of shame and resolution. "Yes, Emma, it's true. My real name is Alex Morgan." Robert, who until that moment had remained in shock, let out a dry laugh. Well, the Morgan heir, working as a mechanic in our humble town. What would the newspapers say if they found out?" "Robert, please," Emma intervened, her voice trembling. "This is not the time." But Robert was far from finished. He approached Alex menacingly. "I warned you to stay away from her, Morgan." "Robert, this is not what you think," Alex said, maintaining his composure. "Emma is just trying to help the town." "Help the town?" Robert scoffed. "The only thing you're doing is destroying everything we've built. You and your damn family always ruining other people's lives." Robert's words hit Alex like a punch. The guilt for his family's past actions threatened to overwhelm him. Emma, seeing the pain in Alex's eyes, intervened. "Enough, Robert. Alex is not responsible for his family's mistakes. He's trying to make things right." Robert turned to Emma, his face a mask of fury and pain. "You defend him? After everything I've done for you, for your family, is this how you repay me?" "Everything you've done?" Emma asked, confused. "What are you talking about, Robert?" Robert seemed to realize he had said too much. He stepped back, trying to compose himself. "Nothing. Forget it. Just go inside, Emma. We need to talk." But Emma didn't move. "No, Robert. I think it's better if you leave. We'll talk tomorrow, when you're calmer." Robert looked from Emma to Alex, anger and frustration evident on his face. Without another word, he got into his car and drove, away at full speed. Emma turned to Alex, concern in her eyes. "I'm sorry about that. I don't know what's gotten into him lately." Alex gently took her hand. "Don't apologize. I understand the situation is difficult for everyone." They looked at each other for a moment, a current of unspoken emotions passing between them. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "You should go. It's late and we both need to rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Alex nodded, reluctantly letting go of her hand. "You're right. Good night, Emma." "Good night, Alex," she replied, before entering her house. As Alex walked back to the garage, he couldn't stop thinking about Emma, about Robert, about everything that was happening in Hidden Valley. He knew they were on the verge of discovering something big, something that could change everything. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, dark forces were moving in the shadows, preparing to strike. The real battle for Hidden Valley was about to begin, and no one was prepared for the revelations and betrayals that were about to come. The next morning, Alex woke to the sound of his phone. It was Jack Soto. "Alex, we need to talk, I've discovered. Something that changes everything." "What is it?" Alex asked, now fully awake. "Not over the phone. Meet me at the town lookout in an hour. Come alone." The call ended, leaving Alex with a feeling of unease. He quickly dressed and left, leaving a note for Pete explaining that he had to go out on urgent business. Meanwhile, at Emma's house, she was preparing for another day at school when she heard a knock at the door. Upon opening it, she found herself face to face with Robert. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his voice laden with emotion. Emma hesitated for a moment, but finally let him in. "Okay, Robert, but make it quick. I have to go to school." Robert entered, pacing nervously around the living room. "Emma, I know things have been tense between us lately, but you have to understand everything I've done for us, for our future." "What are you talking about?" "Robert?" Emma asked, confused and a little scared by the intensity in his voice. Robert stopped, looking her straight in the eyes. "The shopping mall, the business with the Morgans, it was all part of a plan to secure our future, to give you the life you deserve." Emma felt the ground move beneath her feet. What are you saying?" "I'm saying I made deals, Emma, deals, that would benefit us enormously. But now, with Alex Morgan sticking his nose into everything, it's in danger of collapsing." Emma stepped back, horrified. "Are you admitting that you've been part of all this corruption? That you've been deceiving the entire town?" Robert moved towards her, pleading. "You don't understand. I did it for us. Please, Emma, I need you to trust me. I need you to help me stop Alex before it's too late." At the town lookout, Alex anxiously waited for Jack. Finally, the detective appeared with a folder under his arm. "What did you discover, Jack?" Alex asked without preamble. Jack looked around, making sure they were alone. "Alex, what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about your family and about Hidden Valley." He opened the folder and showed Alex a series of old medical documents. "These are records from the city hospital. from over 25 years ago. Look at the date of birth and the mother's name. Alex took the documents, his eyes widening in surprise as he read, This can't be true." "It is," Jack confirmed. "Emma is, not just someone your family wronged in the past. Emma is your sister, Alex. Your father had an affair years ago with Emma's mother. You're the legitimate son, the heir, but Emma is Alfred Morgan's secret daughter." Alex felt the world spinning around him. Everything he thought he knew his entire life was shaken by this revelation. How is it possible that no one knew?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jack sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Your father made sure to keep it secret. He paid doctors, nurses, even Emma's own mother to keep quiet. But he left a trail, Alex. A trail I've been following for weeks." Alex leaned on the lookout railing, feeling his legs might give out at any moment. "Does Emma know?" "No," Jack replied. "From what I've been able to find out, neither she nor her mother know the truth. Your father made them believe that the money he gave them was compensation for the businesses that ruined her family, not covert child support." "My God," Alex murmured, "this changes everything. How do I tell Emma? How do I explain to her that her entire life has been a lie?" Jack put a hand on Alex's shoulder with care and compassion. "But Alex, there's something else you should know. I believe Robert has discovered this information, or at least part of it." Alex turned sharply. "What? How?" "I'm not sure," Jack admitted, "but I've noticed suspicious movements, encrypted calls, secret meetings. I think he's planning to use this information as leverage, possibly to blackmail your father, or to manipulate Emma." Alex's mind was racing. "We have to warn Emma. We have to protect her." Just then, Alex's phone rang. It was a message from Emma. "I need to see you. It's urgent. Come to the school as soon as possible." Alex looked at Jack, concern evident in his eyes. "It's Emma. She says it's urgent." "Go," said Jack, "but be careful. We don't know who else might be involved in this." Alex nodded and ran off towards the school, his mind a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts. How was he going to face Emma now that he knew the truth? How would this change their relationship, his mission in Hidden Valley? Meanwhile, in Robert's office at the town hall, the mayor was having a tense phone conversation. "Yes, Mr. Morgan," Robert was saying, his voice a mixture of respect and fear. "Your son is here in Hidden Valley. He's been causing trouble, investigating the shopping mall project." The voice on the other end of the line, cold and authoritative, replied, "Keep an eye on him, Robert. Don't let him ruin our plans, and remember, if anyone discovers the truth about Emma, we'll all fall." "I understand, sir," Robert replied. "I'll do whatever is necessary." When he hung up the phone, Robert stood staring out the window, observing the town he had sworn to protect and was now selling to the highest bidder. When had things gotten so complicated? At the school, Emma anxiously awaited Alex's arrival. After Robert's visit that morning, she felt her world was crumbling. She needed to talk to someone she could trust, and surprisingly, that someone was Alex. When Alex arrived, panting from the run, he found Emma in the schoolyard, sitting on a swing, the very image of the lost girl she once was. "Emma," he said softly, approaching. "Are you okay? I got your message." Emma looked up, her eyes full of unshed tears. "Alex, I don't know what to do, Robert. He admitted he's been involved in shady business with your family. He says he did it for me, for our future, but..." Alex knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. The gesture, so simple and so intimate, made both of them feel a connection that went beyond what they could understand at that moment. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you," Alex began, his heart pounding. "It's about my family, about your family, about us." Emma looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Alex took a deep breath. "It was now or never. Emma, I've discovered something that changes everything. You and I, we're siblings." The silence that followed that statement was deafening. Emma looked at him, incredulous, as if waiting for Alex to smile and tell her it was a joke at any moment. What are you saying?" she finally managed to articulate. Alex proceeded to explain everything Jack had discovered. His father's affair, the secret birth, the covert payments. With each word, he saw Emma's world crumbling a little more. "No," Emma said, standing up abruptly. "No, this can't be true. My father, my mother, they would never lie to me like this. Emma, I know it's hard to believe, but we have proof, medical records, bank transfers." "Enough," Emma cried, tears running down her cheeks. "This is too much, First Robert. Now has my entire life been a lie?" Alex tried to approach, but Emma stepped back. I need to be alone. Please, Alex, go." "Emma, please, let me help you. We're in this together," Alex pleaded. But Emma was already walking away, running towards the school building. Alex stood there in the middle of the yard, feeling he had gained and lost a sister in the same instant. What neither of them noticed was the figure observing them from the shadows. Robert had witnessed the entire scene, and a sinister smile formed on his face. This was exactly what he needed to set his plan in motion. Meanwhile, at Dr. Martinez's clinic, the doctor was nervously reviewing some old files when he heard a noise. Looking up, he found himself face to face with a man he never expected to see in Hidden Valley. "Mr. Morgan," said the doctor, turning pale. What are you doing here?" Alfred Morgan, the patriarch of the family, and Claude's response was limited as it hit the maximum length allowed at this time. GL Continuar D, father of Alex and Emma, entered the small office, his presence filling the space. "Dr. Martinez, it's been a long time. I believe you and I have much to discuss." The doctor swallowed hard, knowing that Alfred Morgan's arrival in Hidden Valley could only mean one thing. The past had finally caught up with the present, and the consequences would be devastating for everyone. As the sun began to set over Hidden Valley, the threads of destiny were intertwining, setting the stage for even more shocking revelations and decisions that would change everyone's lives forever. The real battle for truth, love, and redemption was just beginning. The night had fallen over Hidden Valley, but the town was far from asleep. In different corners of the small community, the protagonists of our story struggled with the day's revelations and the decisions they would have to make. In the small room behind Pete's garage, Alex paced like a caged lion. The revelation that Emma was his sister had shaken him to the core. How could he have gone from being a lonely heir to having a sister in a matter of weeks? And more importantly, how could he protect Emma from the machinations of his father and Robert? A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Pete with a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "Boy, I brought you this. Looks like you need it," said the old man, entering the room. Alex thanked him with a gesture and took the cup. "Thanks, Pete. I don't know what I'd do without you." Pete sat in the room's only chair, looking at Alex with wise and tired eyes. "Want to talk about what's bothering you?" For a moment, Alex considered keeping the secret, but the kindness in Pete's eyes convinced him he needed an ally, someone he could trust completely. "Pete, I've discovered something that changes everything," Alex began, and proceeded to tell him about Emma, about his father, about the web of lies that had enveloped Hidden Valley for decades. When he finished, Pete remained silent for a long moment, processing the information. Finally, he spoke. "Alex, son, life sometimes puts tests before us that seem impossible to overcome. But remember this: the truth, as painful as it may be, always finds its way to the light." "But how can I protect Emma? How can I undo years of lies and betrayal?" Alex asked. Desperate, Pete stood up and put a hand on Alex's shoulder. "With honesty, with compassion, and with courage, Emma will need time to process all of this. Give her that time, but don't leave her alone. And as for your father and Robert, well, sometimes you have to face the demons of the past to be able to build a future." Meanwhile, in Emma's house, the young teacher was struggling with her own demons. Alex's revelation had shaken the foundations of her world. How could it be true? How could her parents have lied to her all her life? With trembling hands, Emma pulled out an old box from under her bed. It contained memories from her childhood, photos, letters, small treasures she had kept over the years. Among them, she found a photo that had always intrigued her as a child, sitting on a swing, with a man whose face wasn't clearly visible standing behind her. She had always assumed it was her father, but now could it be Alfred Morgan? The man who, according to Alex, was her real father. A noise at the door startled her. It was Robert. "Emma, honey, are you okay? You haven't answered my calls," he said, entering the room. Emma quickly put the photo away. "I'm fine, Robert. I just needed to be alone." Robert sat next to her on the bed, his face a mask of concern. "Emma, I know things have been difficult lately, but I want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what happens." Emma looked at him, searching his eyes for some indication of the truth. Did Robert know about her real father? Was he part of this whole conspiracy? "Robert," she began, deciding to face the situation head-on. "What do you really know about my family? About the Morgans?" Robert seemed surprised by the question, but recovered quickly. "Why do you ask that, Emma? Has something happened?" "Just answer the question, please," Emma insisted. Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emma, there are things from the past that are better left buried. Believe me when I say that everything I've done for your good, for our future." "Our future?" Emma repeated, feeling a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Robert, how can there be a future built on lies?" Before Robert could answer, the sound of a car parking in front of the house interrupted them. Through the window, Emma saw an elegantly dressed man get out of a luxurious car. Even in the darkness of the night, there was something familiar about him. "Oh no," Robert muttered, turning pale. "It's Alfred Morgan." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Her father. Her real father was here. Meanwhile, at Dr. Martinez's clinic, the doctor and Alfred Morgan were having a tense conversation. "Doctor, I hope you understand the delicacy of this situation," Alfred was saying, his voice soft but laden with threat. "Emma's medical records must remain secret." Dr. Martinez, visibly nervous, replied, "Mr. Morgan, I've kept this secret for more than 2 decades, but I must warn you, your son, Alex, and Detective Soto have been asking questions. I don't know how much longer I can keep this hidden." Alfred Morgan stood up, his imposing figure filling the small office. "Then we'll have to make sure those records disappear, won't we, Doctor?" Before Dr. Martinez could respond, the clinic door burst open. It was Jack Soto, with a look of determination on his face. "I'm afraid those records aren't going anywhere, Mr. Morgan," Jack said in English, surprising both men. "And I think it's time everyone in Hidden Valley knows the truth." Alfred turned slowly, a cold smile forming on his lips. "Detective Soto, what an inopportune surprise. Do you really think you can stand up to me?" "I'm not alone in this, Mr. Morgan," Jack replied, pulling out his phone. "Right now, copies of those records are being sent to several trusted people. If anything happens to me or to Dr. Martinez, the truth will come to light." The tension in the room was palpable. Alfred Morgan, for the first time in years, seemed to have lost control of the situation. Meanwhile, at Emma's house, Alfred Morgan's arrival had created emotional chaos. Emma, unable to face the man who was apparently her biological father, had fled through the back door, leaving Robert to deal with the situation. She ran through the dark streets of Hidden Valley, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. Without realizing it, her steps led her to the old park where she used to play as a child. There, sitting on one of the swings, she found Alex. "Emma," he said, surprised to see her, I didn't expect to see you here." Emma stopped, unsure how to proceed. Part of her wanted to run away, another part craved answers. "Alex," she began, her voice trembling, "tell me the truth, the whole truth." Alex nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Sit down, please," he said, pointing to the swing next to him. "It's a long story and not all of its parts are pleasant." As Emma took a seat, Alex began to narrate the complete story. His father's affair, Emma's secret birth, the years of deception and covert payments. With each word, he saw how Emma's world transformed, how the reality she had known crumbled to give way to a new and painful truth. "But there's something else, Emma," Alex said, his voice softening. "Despite how all this began, despite the lies and secrets, I'm grateful to have found you, to have a sister." Emma looked at him, silent tears running down her cheeks. "Alex, I don't know what to feel. My whole life has been a lie. How can I trust anyone now? Alex gently took her hand. Emma, I understand your pain, your confusion, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Not as Alfred Morgan's son, not as the heir to a fortune, but as your brother. If you give me the chance, I promise to always be by your side, to protect you and support you in everything. For a moment, silence reigned between them. Then, slowly, Emma squeezed Alex's hand. I need time to process all this, but thank you, Alex, for being honest, for being here. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. It was Pete, panting from the run. Alex, Emma, he said between labored breaths. You have to come quickly. Something's happening at Dr. Martinez's clinic. Without losing a second, Alex and Emma followed Pete through the streets of Hidden Valley. Upon arriving at the clinic, they encountered a chaotic scene. Jack Soto was at the door, arguing heatedly with Alfred. Morgan Dr. Martinez watched from a corner, visibly nervous. Dad! Alex exclaimed, surprised to see his father there. Alfred Morgan turned, his face a mask of contained fury. Alex, what the hell do you think you're doing? But before Alex could respond, Alfred's eyes fell on Emma. For a moment, his expression changed, showing a mixture of surprise, guilt, and affection. Emma, he said softly, as if seeing a ghost. Emma stepped back, overwhelmed by the situation. I can't do this, she said, and ran off again. Alex was about to follow her when Jack stopped him. Wait, Alex, we need to resolve this here and now. Alfred Morgan seemed to regain his composure. There's nothing to resolve. This is a private family situation. And I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, Dr. Martinez interrupted, surprising everyone. But I can't keep this secret any longer. It's time for the truth to come out. As the doctor spoke, revealing years of secrets and lies, Alex noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was Robert, and his expression didn't bode well. Well, Robert said, a sinister smile on his face. Looks like I arrived just in time for the big reveal. How about I add my own piece to this puzzle? Everyone turned to Robert, aware that they were about to discover yet another layer in this complicated story. The night in Hidden Valley was far from over, and secrets buried for years were about to surface, forever changing the fate of all involved. The tension in Dr. Martinez's clinic was palpable. All eyes were fixed on Robert, waiting for the revelation he had promised. The mayor of Hidden Valley paced slowly, savoring the attention of his captive audience. You know, Robert began, his voice laden with false casualness, I've always been fascinated by how fate plays with our lives, how the decisions we make, no matter how small, can have consequences that extend for decades. Alfred Morgan stepped forward, his patience wearing thin. Cut the games, Robert. If you have something to say it now. Robert smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Very well, Mr. Morgan. Why don't we start by talking about the night you decided that Hidden Valley's future was worth less than your business ambitions? Alex looked at his father, confused. What is he talking about, Dad? Alfred maintained his composure, but a slight tremor in his hand betrayed his nervousness. I don't know what you're referring to, Robert. Oh, I think you know very well, Robert continued. 25 years ago, when you came to Hidden Valley with your promises of progress and development, when you convinced our parents, our grandparents, to invest everything they had in your revolutionary project. Do you remember that, Mr. Morgan? Dr. Martinez, who had remained silent until that moment, spoke. I remember it was the year half the town lost their savings. Alex felt a knot forming in his stomach. He had heard rumors about his father's unethical business practices, but he had never wanted to believe them. But that's not all, is it, Mr. Morgan? Robert pressed. Why don't you tell them about the real reason you came back to Hidden Valley years later, about your affair with Emma's mother? Alfred Morgan visibly paled. That's enough, Robert. You have no right to what? Robert interrupted, his voice rising. To tell the truth, to expose how you destroyed families, ruined lives, all for your greed? Jack Soto, who had been observing in silence, intervened. Robert, how do you know all this? Robert turned to the detective, a bitter smile on his face. Because I was there, because I saw how my family lost everything, because I swore that someday I would make the Morgans pay for what they did. A sepulchral silence fell over the room. Alex looked at his father, searching for a denial, an explanation, something that could contradict Robert's accusations, but Alfred Morgan remained silent, his face a mask of guilt and resignation. "So," Alex said slowly, "all of this, the shopping mall, your engagement to Emma, it was part of a revenge plan?" Robert nodded. "At first, yes, I wanted to ruin the Morgans like they ruined us. But then you fell in love with Emma," Jack completed, the pieces of the puzzle fitting in his mind. "Yes," Robert admitted, his voice breaking for the first time, "and I found myself trapped between my desire for revenge and my love for her." At that moment, a choked sob caught everyone's attention. Emma was standing at the clinic door, having returned just in time to hear the last revelations. "Emma," Alex whispered, taking a step towards his newly discovered sister. But Emma stepped back, her eyes full of pain and betrayal. "No, I can't, all of you." "How could you?" Before anyone could stop her, Emma ran off again, disappearing into the darkness of the night. "Emma!" Alex and Robert shouted in unison, ready to follow her. "Wait!" Dr. Martinez's voice stopped them. "There's something else you need to know, something I've kept secret for too long." Everyone turned to the doctor, expectant. "The night Emma was born," the doctor began, his voice trembling but firm, "there were complications. Emma's mother, she didn't survive the childbirth." Alfred Morgan collapsed into a chair, the weight of years and secrets finally crushing him. "My God, what have I done?" Alex, struggling to process all this new information, turned to Robert. "You knew, didn't you? You knew Emma was my sister." Robert nodded slowly. "I found out a few months ago when I started investigating for my revenge plan. But by then I was already in love with Emma. I didn't know what to do." "We have to find her," Alex said, his voice laden with determination. "She needs to know the whole truth." Jack Soto stepped forward. "I'll go with you. I know this town like the back of my hand." As Alex, Robert and Jack prepared to leave in search of Emma, Alfred Morgan stood up, his face showing a resolution that Alex had never seen before. "Son," he said, putting a hand on Alex's shoulder, "go find your sister. I'll stay here. It's time I face the consequences of my actions." Alex looked at his father, a mixture of conflicting emotions in his heart. "Dad, go," Alfred insisted. "Emma needs you now." As Alex, Robert and Jack left the clinic, Pete approached Alfred Morgan. "Mr. Morgan," said the old man, his voice laden with wisdom, "it's never too late to do the right thing." Alfred nodded, unshed tears shining in his eyes. "You're right, Pete, and I think I know where to start." Meanwhile, in the dark streets of Hidden Valley, Emma ran aimlessly, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and memories. Without realizing it, her steps led her to a familiar place, her family's old farm, now abandoned and in ruins. She stopped in front of the dilapidated fence, memories of a happy childhood cruelly contrasting with the night's revelations. How much of her life had been real? How much had been an elaborate lie? "I knew I'd find you here," said a soft voice behind her. Emma turned to find herself face to face with Alex. For a moment, they looked at each other in silence, the weight of their newly discovered kinship floating between them. "Emma," Alex began, taking a step towards her, "I know all this is overwhelming, but—" "Overwhelming?" Emma interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Alex, my whole life has been a lie. My father, my mother, Robert, even you. How am I supposed to handle this?" Alex moved closer, extending a hand towards her. "You're not alone in this, Emma. I'm here. And I promise you that together we'll uncover the truth, the whole truth." Emma hesitated for a moment, but finally took Alex's hand. In that instant, something changed between them. They were no longer two strangers, united by extraordinary circumstances, but siblings bound by blood ties and a shared destiny. "There's something else you need to know," Alex said softly, "about your mother." As Alex shared with Emma the final revelation about her birth and her mother's death, Robert and Jack observed them from a distance. "Do you think she'll ever forgive us?" Robert asked, his voice laden with remorse. Jack put a hand on the mayor's shoulder. "Forgiveness is a long road, Robert. But I think today we've taken the first step." Claude's response was limited. As it hit the maximum length allowed at this time, GL Continua. Back in town, Alfred Morgan was facing his own reckoning. With the help of Pete and Dr. Martinez, he began drafting a detailed confession of all his crimes and deceptions. "This will destroy everything I've built," Alfred muttered, his pen trembling over the paper. "Maybe," Pete replied, "but it's also an opportunity to build something new, something better." As dawn began to break over Hidden Valley, its inhabitants were preparing for a new day that promised monumental changes. The truth, long buried, had finally come to light, and with it, the possibility of redemption and a new beginning. Alex and Emma, hand in hand, walked back to town. They had a long road ahead, full of pain, healing, and discovery. But for the first time in a long time, both felt a spark of hope. "What do we do now?" Emma asked, looking at her newly discovered brother. Alex gently squeezed her hand. "Whatever is necessary to make things right. For you, for me, for Hidden Valley. Together." As the sun rose over the horizon, bathing the town in a golden light, the inhabitants of Hidden Valley prepared to face the consequences of decades of secrets and lies, but they also prepared for the possibility of a new beginning, one based on truth, compassion, and redemption. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same in Hidden Valley. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly what the town needed. The days that followed the revelations in Hidden Valley were a whirlwind of emotions, confrontations, and finally, reconciliations. The town, shaken to its core by the revealed secrets, slowly began to process the truth and seek a way forward. In the central square, a town assembly had been convened. The inhabitants of Hidden Valley, from the oldest to the youngest, gathered to decide the future of their community. At the center of it all, standing before the crowd, were Alex and Emma, united in their determination to make things right. Alex stepped forward, his voice clear and firm, resonating in the square. "People of Hidden Valley," he began. "We have gone through difficult times. Lies, deceptions, and betrayals have threatened to destroy the very fabric of our community. But today we are here, not to point fingers, but to decide together how to move forward." Emma joined her brother, taking his hand in a gesture of unity. "This town has been my home all my life," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "And although I've discovered that much of what I believed I knew was a lie, one thing remains true. Hidden Valley is my home, and all of you are my family." A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Pete, respected by all, stood up. "Alex, Emma," said the old man, "you speak with wisdom beyond your years. But tell us, what do you propose to heal the wounds of our town?" Alex nodded, grateful for the question. "We have a plan. With the help of Detective Jack Soto, we have unraveled the web of corruption that threatened Hidden Valley. The shopping mall project, which would have destroyed much of our land, has been cancelled." A collective sigh of relief was heard among the crowd. "But that's not all," Emma continued. "My fae, Alfred Morgan, has agreed to return all the lands and properties fraudulently acquired to their rightful owners. Additionally, he has established a fund for the sustainable development of Hidden Valley, which will be administered by a council elected by you, the people." Surprise and skepticism mixed on the faces of the inhabitants. "And how do we know we can trust the Morgans after everything that's happened?" someone shouted from the crowd. It was then that Alfred Morgan, who had remained silent at the back of the square, stepped forward. His face showed the weight of his actions, but also a renewed determination. "You're right to doubt me," he said, his voice laden with remorse. "I've made terrible mistakes. I've hurt many people, including my own children. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I ask for the opportunity to amend my errors. Every penny I earned dishonestly will be returned, every property restored, and I will submit myself to justice for my crimes." A stunned silence fell over the square. No one expected such an open confession from the powerful Alfred Morgan. Robert, who had been listening in silence, approached the center. "I too must apologize," he said, his voice broken by emotion. "My desire for revenge almost destroyed what I loved most, Emma." He turned to her. "I know I've betrayed your trust, but I hope that someday you can forgive me." Emma looked at Robert, her eyes full of a mixture of pain and understanding. "Forgiveness will take time, Robert, but I believe we all deserve the chance to redeem our mistakes." Jack Soto, who had been observing from the side, stepped forward. "As a representative of the law, I can assure you that all those involved in illegal acts will face the consequences of their actions. But I also believe in restorative justice. Hidden Valley has the opportunity to become an example of how a community can heal and rebuild itself." Pete, with tears in his eyes, spoke again. "My dear friends and neighbors, we have witnessed great darkness, but also great light. The truth, as painful as it may be, has freed us. Now it's up to us to decide what we'll do with that freedom." The assembly continued for hours with proposals, debates, and finally, decisions. It was agreed to form a new governing council for Hidden Valley, one that truly represented the interests of all inhabitants. Alex and Emma, respecting the will of the people, decided to stay and work to rebuild trust and the social fabric of the community. In the months that followed, Hidden Valley experienced a remarkable transformation. Old wounds began to heal, and although the road was not easy, honesty and transparency became the pillars of the town's new era. Alex, using his business, knowledge for the common good, helped establish cooperatives and small businesses that sustainably leverage the region's natural resources. Emma, for her part, expanded her educational work, creating training programs for adults and children that fostered critical thinking and civic participation. Robert, after serving a reduced sentence for his cooperation with justice, returned to Hidden Valley as a changed man. Although his romantic relationship with Emma had ended, they both found a friendship based on mutual respect and a shared desire to do good. Alfred Morgan, after facing the legal consequences of his actions, dedicated the rest of his life to working tirelessly to repair the damage he had caused. Although he could never fully regain people's trust, his actions spoke louder than his words, and slowly he began to earn a place in the community. A year after that fateful assembly, Hidden Valley celebrated its rebirth. The central square, once the scene of confrontations and painful revelations, now bustled with life and joy. A community festival marked the anniversary of the town's new era. Alex and Emma, surrounded by their friends and neighbors, observed the celebration with a mixture of pride and humility. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up like this?" Emma asked, a smile playing on her lips. Alex shook his head, laughing softly. "Never. When I came to Hidden Valley, I was running away from my life, from my identity. Now I feel like I've finally found my place in the world." "And a sister," Emma added, affectionately squeezing Alex's hand. "And a sister," he confirmed, returning the gesture. From a corner of the square, Pete watched them with a satisfied smile. He approached them, his step slow but sure. "My dear children," said the old man, his voice laden with affection, "you've brought more than truth to Hidden Valley. You've brought hope, renewal. I'm proud of you." Alex and Emma embraced the old mechanic, the man who had been a beacon of wisdom and kindness during the darkest moments. As the party continued around them, Alex reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. He had come to Hidden Valley seeking to escape his past, but instead had found his future. A future full of challenges, yes, but also of love, purpose, and the joy of truly belonging to a community. Emma, as if reading his thoughts, said softly, "You know, I think I finally understand what Hidden Valley means. It's not just a place on the map. It's a treasure. Something precious that was hidden and that we've finally discovered." Alex nodded, looking around at the smiling faces of the townspeople, at the children playing, at the elderly sharing stories. "You're right," he said. "And now it's our duty to protect and nurture this treasure." As the sun set over Hidden Valley, bathing the town in a warm golden glow, Alex and Emma joined the celebration, dancing to the rhythm of local music. The future was bright, full of possibilities, and although they knew there would be more challenges to come, they were ready to face them. Together as siblings, as part of a reborn community, as guardians of a valley that was no longer hidden, but shone with the light of truth and hope. And so, as the stars began to peek out in the night sky, Hidden Valley continued its party, celebrating not only its past and present, but also its future. A future built on the foundations of honesty, compassion, and unity. A future that, although uncertain, promised to be as beautiful and exciting as the valley itself,